China has confirmed more than 17,000 cases of the virus now. The death toll's risen to over 360. 4 confirmed cases in Canada, 3 in Ontario and 1 in British Columbia. Now, the opposition parties have been demanding more detail about the government's plan for evacuating the Canadians from China. Now they have some of it, so let's bring in 3 members of Parliament to discuss the government's response from the foyer of the House tonight. Joined once again by Rob Oliphant, the Parliamentary Secretary to the Minister of Foreign Affairs. Robert Kitchen is the Deputy Health Critic for the official opposition Conservatives, and Don Davies is the Health Critic for the NDP. I just spoke with the Minister of Health, Patty Hajdu. So, Mr. Kitchen, let me start with you. Your party's been calling for a detailed plan from the government for how it's going to get these Canadians home from Canada. We got more details today. What questions do you still have about the plan?
Well, it's interesting. They've come up with a plan today, which is great, which we've been asking for in committee last week, and we're looking forward to hearing more about it. But it does spell out a lot more of the information that we wanted to hear. The issues that we want to follow forward on, though, are where and what has happened that's transpired before this, and how are we going to step forward to assure the Canadians that everything was done from day one when this came to attention.
Okay, such as what? What more do you need to know at this point? Are you satisfied now with the plan they have to get these Canadians out of China?
So we've listened to the Minister and Dr. Tam were with us last week, and today we met with CBSA and GAC and a number of other...
And Transport Department and Public Safety, yep.
And they spilled out a lot of things that are there, but there's still some concerns that are out there. For example, the plane that originally came, that brought the original first case into Canada. Question is that now we're identifying that there's potential that people are on those planes, that there might be the virus within that plane. And the reality is, when asked the question, where is that plane? We don't know where it is. And when asked today, do they know? They have no idea. All
right, Mr. Davies, you too have called for a plan and better communication from the government. Are you satisfied today?
Well, satisfied is I don't know if that's the word I would use. I mean, I think the government is moving along. Whether or not they're moving along as fast as they ought to be, I think, is a different question. And there still are, I think, a lot of very important questions that are yet to be answered. For instance, in committee, which we just came from to do this interview, we didn't get a clear answer to the question of what the status of permanent residents in China are. And we've got issues of couples, let's say the husband is a Canadian citizen and the wife is not, or there's a Canadian citizen child there with their grandparents. We still don't have really clear answers about whether those permanent residents will be allowed to come back. We don't know. We don't know exactly what the plan is for the other countries that the WHO just indicated concern about. We have to remember that the WHO declared a public health emergency of international concern because they were worried that there are countries around the world that don't have the ability to deal with coronavirus. So I asked the question, does Canada have a list of what those countries are so we can get ahead of the game, ahead of the curve, and make sure that we're screening people coming from those countries before they get here? No such list exists, apparently.
All right, Mr. Oliphant, let me have you pick up on some of the concerns of your colleague. Can you answer, I guess, let's start with Mr. Kitchen's point. There are still some questions around the protection process in this country. Do you know the answer to where the plane's gone that carried the first infected Canadian back from China?
I think that the first thing we need to talk about is the fact that we have had a number of plans. It's not that we've had no plan. We've had a number of plans depending on how the situation unfolded. Just going back 1 week, we had 2 Canadians registered a week ago that were requesting consular assistance to come home. Today, we have 304. That's in 7 days. Each of those people that have been added to the list have necessitated a response. We immediately engaged a contract with an airplane to get that available with a crew that was trained. We now have visas have been issued for all the workers on that plane, the crew on that plane, who are trained in this sort of situation. We're recognizing that at 304, we'll need 2 planes. So we now have engaged 2 planes to do that. These are the kinds of things that a government does. We are following very closely a fluid situation and watching as it unfolds to make sure that we are providing the leadership that Canadians would expect us to provide.
Do you think we're, the sticking point now seems to be, it sounds like the Chinese have given us approval to get a plane in there. The question is when to do it. Do you know if we're talking hours or are we talking days here still?
We're very close on this. Right now, when the visas were issued for the crew to be able to fly and to land, that was a very good sign. Chinese officials have been cooperative. They have obviously an overwhelming concern about keeping the virus as limited as possible and defeating the virus, making sure that it is extinguished. So that's their number one goal. Their secondary goal is obviously helping nationals from other countries. We recognize the primacy of ending the disease. So we are working with them. We are advocating on behalf of Canadians. We are making sure we have airplanes at the ready. I am hoping that shortly we'll be able to tell you when that is happening.
All right,
and we'll bring them home.
Mr. Kitchen, once they get here, they'll be quarantined at CFB Trenton. Does that seem like the right way to go to you, to quarantine these people when they get back for 14 days?
Definitely, when we hear that basically the time frame is a 14-day time frame from exposure and incubation period. So that time frame has been identified by the World Health Organization, has been identified by Dr. Tam, and it's one that we need to make certain that we follow through on. Basically, and as we hear, and what we've heard today, with the plane leaving China or in Vietnam right now, into China, picking up the evacuees, flying them back, stopping in Vancouver, not taking them, deboarding them, and then refueling the plane, then flying them to Trenton is a tremendous thing. You know, we're trying to put them in a place where throughout that flight that they're being looked after, which is important to do, to not only make certain that, A, when they get on the plane, that they aren't showing signs and symptoms. As they progress, it's a fantastic idea where we see them, they have an isolation room on the plane from what we understand. This is great things, and as we've indicated, this is a disease that is transpiring as we go. How long it'll be and how far it'll go, whether it'll be a month, whether it'll be 2 months, it's hard to see.
The time is kind of short for us tonight, so Mr. Davies, let me end with you here. The notion of the quarantine and the plan for the quarantine, you've heard about that. I think you were talking to health officials a bit, or the foreign affairs people about some of that at committee today maybe. Are you satisfied with that plan to put these people in isolation for 14 days?
Well, in a word, yes. I think that there's no doubt that they have to be quarantined for 14 days, but there's still yet further information we need. For instance, I asked the question, what is the government's position on asymptomatic transmission? In other words, does the Canadian government, are they assuming that people can or they cannot transmit this virus when they're asymptomatic? Heard crickets from committee. You know, sometimes I learn more sitting here than I do at committee. Mr. Oliphant said he's sending 2 planes. I asked that question in committee. They couldn't say how many planes they were sending or when.
Well, they have one for sure, and they've got Mr. Oliphant.
One for sure. But
a very quick final question to answer for me, Mr. Oliphant, on that.
Well, the reality is we won't even know how many people will get on board because China will not allow anyone with symptoms to get on the plane.
So they're going to be screened. They're going to be screened there by the Chinese, then screened by the Canadians,
and we'll have a second plane ready if we need it. And that's what we're trying to do. And the situation is fluid. They will be taken care of, and Canadians at home will be safe. We have those 2 goals, making sure that Canadians at home are safe and making sure that Canadians get home.
All right, gentlemen, it's a fast-moving story. Appreciate your input tonight, and we'll stay on top of it. Thank you all.
Thank you,
Peter.